Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Thomas Rivers moved into a quiet lake house to escape his past, he never expected war, especially not with a manicured tyrant named Karen. But when the HOA tried to claim land they didn't own, Thomas fought back. What followed was a suburban battle for the ages. I moved into the old lake house on a foggy Thursday morning in late March, just after a brutal rainstorm had scrubbed the North Carolina skies clean. The air smelled like wet pine and mud, and I remember thinking it was the first deep breath I'd taken in over a year. I wasn't just unpacking boxes, I was exhaling the past. After losing my wife to cancer and spending the better part of a decade buried in federal engineering contracts and bureaucratic trench warfare in D.C., I needed silence. I needed a place where nobody knew my name or what I'd been through. The house I bought was old, weathered, and slightly lopsided. Perfect. The real estate agent had tried to warn me, twice, that the property bordered a gated HOA development called Pine Harbor Waters. He said it like he was telling me I'd bought a shack next to Chernobyl, but the key detail, the one I made sure to double-check with a property attorney, was this. My house was built in the late 1940s, decades before the HOA ever formed. It wasn't under their jurisdiction, never had been, and legally never would be. And that was the point. I spent the first day unloading tools and reclaiming the front porch from a small army of wasps that had clearly assumed the previous owner wasn't coming back. There was no HOA welcome basket, no pamphlet, no sniffing neighbor dogs, just quiet birdsong and the rhythmic creak of damp wood as I stepped through the house. I was on my fourth trip from the truck when she arrived. I heard her before I saw her, heels on pavement, precise, staccato, like she thought the ground owed her rhythm. I turned and saw a woman in a tailored navy pantsuit striding down the edge of my driveway with a folder under one arm and a righteous expression that could strip paint. She stopped just shy of my front porch, right where my newly installed private property no trespassing sign was duct taped to a rickety post. "Good morning. I'm Karen Milton, president of the Pine Harbor Waters Homeowners Association." I nodded and set down my toolbox. "Thomas Rivers. I don't believe we've met." She gave a tight, performative smile. "No, but we've been watching the activity over here. I wanted to welcome you and also go over a few expectations regarding facade coloration, landscaping symmetry, and neighbor impact mitigation." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" She flipped open her folder. "According to Pine Harbor Waters guidelines." "I'm not in Pine Harbor Waters," I interrupted calmly. Her expression didn't change, but there was a half-second twitch in the left eyelid. "You are adjacent," she replied, like that changed the laws of geography. "This property, while technically outside the HOA, affects the visibility and value alignment of bordering homes. We refer to these as transition parcels." "Transition what?" "Transition parcels," she repeated. "We treat them as properties of interest due to their visual and environmental impact on the HOA boundary. It's standard practice to initiate early alignment." "Yeah, no," I said, stepping down from the porch. "This is private property. No HOA covenants apply here, and I don't need alignment. I need you to step off my land." Her voice jumped an octave. "You can't live here." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm sorry?" This house was never supposed to be occupied again. The HOA made multiple attempts to buy this parcel and have it removed as a blight buffer. "You shouldn't even be here." "Well, I am," I said evenly. "Bought it legally. Paid for it in cash. Got the deed, survey, and title clean as a whistle. So, unless you're planning on levitating off my driveway in the next 5 seconds, I'd suggest you leave." She made a sound like a boiling tea kettle and turned on her heel, stomping back toward the gate. I watched her leave, every step snapping like an accusation. Halfway down the drive, she spun and pointed a perfectly manicured finger at me. "This isn't over, Mr. Rivers." "Didn't think it would be," I muttered, more to myself than to her. Later that night, I installed motion sensor lights, reinforced my locks, and reread the North Carolina statutes on HOA boundary jurisdiction for the third time, just to be sure. Every word was clear. This place was mine. And if Karen wanted to pretend she ran the world past her own fence line, she was in for a bad year. The next morning, I found a glossy envelope stuck to my mailbox with blue painter's tape. It was embossed with the Pine Harbor Waters logo, a pair of white swans, and a pretentious Latin motto I didn't bother translating. I opened it at the kitchen counter while waiting for coffee to brew, already anticipating a migraine. Inside was a tri-fold brochure titled Community Harmony Guidelines, along with a notice of non-compliance, listing several items: unregistered vehicle on property, my pickup, unauthorized structural modification, me repainting the porch, and failure to submit landscaping plan. I laughed out loud. It was the kind of laughter that comes when someone's idiocy becomes performance art. By noon, I'd received 2 more envelopes. One had a carbon copy registration of entry form with the HOA header, demanding that I submit the names and license plates of all individuals residing at or frequenting the parcel. The other was a preliminary violation alert, warning me to remove non-conforming elements from the front yard, which I assumed referred to the half-finished trellis and the wheelbarrow of dirt I'd left by the side. That evening, a guy in a polo shirt and khakis pulled into my gravel drive, stepped out with a clipboard, and started taking photos of my front windows. I opened the screen door slowly, holding my beer in one hand and my phone in the other, camera already recording. "You want to tell me what you're doing on my property?" I asked. "HOA inspection," he replied flatly, not even looking at me. "Try again. You're not the county. You're not law enforcement. You're not code enforcement. You're a guy with khakis and a fake badge. I'm acting on behalf of Pine Harbor Water's HOA. You're trespassing." I cut him off. "You've got 10 seconds to delete every photo you just took and walk back to your car, or I'm calling the sheriff." He hesitated, then fumbled with his phone. I watched the gallery flicker on his screen. My windows, my porch, even the side of my garage. He tried to fake deleting one of the images by swiping out of the app. Rookie move. "You know what? Forget deleting them," I said. "Go ahead and keep those. I'll just submit them with the harassment report." He left without another word, gravel spitting under his tires. I filed a police report that night, detailing the uninvited inspection, and then I took it one step further. I filed a formal complaint with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission and the State Attorney General's HOA Oversight Division. The next morning, a new surprise awaited me. A signpost had been erected at the edge of my property, right by the ditch line, with the Pine Harbor Waters logo and the words "Community Rules Enforced Here." The sign faced my house like a warning. A white van parked nearby, engine idling, with 2 guys inside pretending they weren't watching me through the windshield. I didn't remove the sign right away. I took pictures first. Then I called the city's zoning department and asked them if anyone from the HOA had a permit to post signage on a private parcel not under their jurisdiction. The zoning officer laughed, and said, "Absolutely not. If they did that, it's a violation." I emailed the photos to him and CC'd the HOA board's public email just for good measure. An hour later, a city truck came and ripped the sign out like it was radioactive. The van drove off 5 minutes later. I decided that was enough warning shots. That afternoon, I installed a full perimeter of motion-triggered 4K cameras and posted 3 aluminum signs that read, "Private property, not subject to HOA regulation, trespassers will be prosecuted." I made sure they were reflective and visible from all angles. Later that evening, just before dusk, I stood in my driveway with a glass of bourbon and watched as Karen walked past in her tennis gear, pretending to be on the phone. She glanced at the signs, then at me. I gave her a little nod. She didn't nod back. I went inside and started drafting a certified cease and desist letter to the HOA, just in case she wanted to play legal hardball. She wasn't going to get rid of me with brochures and bullshit. It had been about a week since the last inspection incident, and for a few days, things were almost suspiciously quiet. No new mailings, no clipboard creeps, no HOA vans pretending to admire the view. I'd nearly convinced myself Karen had accepted reality and retreated into whatever suburban lair she used to recharge her passive aggression. Then the mailman accidentally handed me a letter meant for a house inside Pine Harbor Waters. It was addressed to a resident 3 streets down from my property, but what caught my eye was the bold header: "Special Resolution, Emergency HOA, Vote to Annex Parcel Number 112B into Pine Harbor Waters. My address, my land. Parcel 112B. The letter included a copy of a petition and a ballot proposing a new rule that any home within 100 feet of Pine Harbor Water's official boundary line be considered subject to mandatory transitional integration. It sounded like a PR-friendly way of saying, let's absorb the outsider by vote. I looked closer at the petition signatures. Dozens of them. supposedly. But I recognized one name, Gerald Hines, the sweet old guy who walked his dog past my house every evening. I called him. "Gerald, did you sign a petition about my house being annexed into the HOA?" A pause. "What? Hell no. I told Karen last week that mess wasn't legal. She submitted something with your signature. Well, she better have forged it. Because I sure as hell didn't write it." He wasn't the only one. I called 2 more names on the list and both denied ever seeing the petition. I scanned the document and emailed it directly to my attorney and to the state's HOA Oversight Division, tagging it as suspected forgery and requesting an immediate inquiry. My lawyer, Megan, called me 20 minutes later, sounding halfway between entertained and furious. "She's trying to vote you into an HOA you're not part of. That's like the country club voting to force you into a tuxedo because you live next to their parking lot." I asked if this was even remotely legal. "Absolutely not," she said. "It's a stunt. But if she files it formally, we'll bury it." Later that same day, 2 real estate agents showed up at my property gate, one of them holding a folder with a document I hadn't seen before. He claimed to be representing Pine Harbor Waters and said they were there to review the site conditions of the temporary occupancy agreement. I tilted my head. "You want to repeat that?" He flipped open the folder and held it up like it was gospel. Inside was a fabricated lease agreement bearing my name and signature, or something pretending to be it. The document stated that I was leasing the land from Pine Harbor Waters under a 12-month integration trial as part of a voluntary annexation pilot program. I stared at the paper. "That's not my signature." "We were told it was submitted through the HOA's online portal," the agent replied. Karen Milton said the property owner had agreed to terms. I smiled grimly. "Did she also mention that I own this land outright and have never once clicked on anything resembling a portal, pilot program, or HOA integration?" The agents glanced at each other and backed off quickly after I told them they were standing on camera. I asked them to leave and made sure to photograph their car and license plate on their way out. That night, I drove straight to the county records office. I sat down with a clerk and pulled up my parcel's full ownership history, zoning classification, boundary documentation, and deed title. Everything checked out. Clean title, no encumbrances, no easements, and most importantly, 0 HOA jurisdiction. I requested a certified statement from the county assessor explicitly noting that the property was not subject to any HOA covenants or annexation protocols. I also filed a fraud complaint with the local sheriff's department, including photos of the agents, the fake lease, and a notarized affidavit from me stating I never signed or agreed to any such thing. The next morning, I woke up to a new HOA letter on my door, not in the mailbox, mind you, taped directly to the wood with cheap, clear tape. The header read, "Final warning before action." I didn't even finish reading it. I called Megan and told her to prepare the first of what would be several formal cease and desist filings. Karen was no longer just annoying. She was now committing forgery, and I don't let criminals operate on my property. It was just past 2 in the morning when the floodlights hit my bedroom window like a prison break. I jolted awake, reached instinctively for the flashlight on my nightstand, and froze. Outside, my motion-activated cameras had already triggered the perimeter lights, and they illuminated a scene that looked like it had spilled out of some deranged HOA-themed cult gathering. There were at least a dozen people standing on the roadside edge of my property. Some held signs, poorly painted, crooked, clearly done in a rush. One read, "HOA territory only, outsiders out." Another, "Reintegrate or relocate." Front and center, of course, was Karen. Wearing a visor and a windbreaker over what looked like tennis whites, she held a small megaphone and paced like a general surveying a battlefield. Behind her, a few residents stood nervously, casting glances toward my house, unsure if they were attending a rally or an exorcism. Then the shouting started. "This is HOA jurisdiction. This property disrupts neighborhood continuity. You're lowering our resale value. It would have been funny if it wasn't so grotesquely real." I slipped into jeans, threw on a hoodie, and stepped outside with my phone already recording. I'd barely reached the edge of my gravel path when one of the men, tall, mid-50s, wore loafers with no socks, lobbed a can of red spray paint that hit the front step with a sharp clank. Another guy approached the side of the house and started tugging at one of my downspouts, pretending to inspect for compliance. One woman dumped what looked like mulch onto the corner of my yard. "This is trespassing," I said, loudly and clearly, stepping forward so they all saw me. "And this is your final warning. Back off my land." Now Karen raised the megaphone. "Thomas, we're here peacefully to express concern. Your presence is incompatible with the agreed-upon aesthetics and community character of Pine Harbor Waters. Your house was scheduled for permanent closure. You reactivated a nuisance. Lady, the only nuisance I see is standing on my easement with a cone and a moral superiority complex." A few neighbors laughed, that nervous, startled laugh people make when they realize they've crossed a line, but don't know how to retreat. I didn't wait for it to escalate further. I walked back inside, locked the door, and dialed the sheriff's non-emergency number. Within 20 minutes, a cruiser rolled up. Deputy Frazier, a square-shouldered, no-nonsense woman I'd spoken with once before, stepped out, took one look at the crowd, and turned on her body cam. "Everyone off the property," she said without hesitation. "This is private land. If you're here past the ditch line, you're trespassing. I don't care what your HOA says." Karen tried to spin it. "This is a community demonstration, protected speech." Frazier cut her off at 2 a.m. with paint cans and megaphones. "No, ma'am. This is harassment. Disperse now, or I start taking names and writing citations." They broke formation like a spilled bowl of rice. Within 5 minutes, the roadside was empty again. Karen retreated without another word, but her expression made it clear. This was not surrender. This was regrouping. The deputy walked over to me. "You want to press charges?" I hesitated. "Not tonight. But I want this logged. Every damn second of it. You got footage. Multiple angles. Then you're already ahead of 90% of people dealing with HOA nutjobs. Save it. You may need it." I nodded. "I'm starting to think I will." The next morning, I got an email from a burner Gmail account named Concerned Neighbor 89 with a PDF attached. The file was titled Community Arts Demonstration Summary in HOA Cultural Participation. It described the previous night's mob as an impromptu cultural display aimed at fostering dialogue between traditional residents and boundary dwellers. Though file claimed it was non-affiliated with HOA leadership, but the metadata showed it was created on Karen's laptop. I forwarded it straight to my lawyer, the sheriff's office, and the state's HOA oversight email with a big fat note. "Tell me again, this is a coincidence." I was done reacting. It was time to start building a case. 3 days after the night parade of idiots, I found a flash drive in my mailbox. No envelope, no note, just a plain black USB stick taped to a folded paper towel. For a second, I thought it was a threat. Maybe a virus, maybe some HOA psycho's manifesto. But curiosity and paranoia have always been close cousins, so I plugged it into an old backup laptop that wasn't connected to Wi-Fi. Inside, 2 folders, timestamped security cam footage, and a single video file labeled HOA_MTG_RECON_footage.mov. I opened it. The first folder was grainy nighttime footage taken from a neighbor's security system across the street. Angle was perfect. Karen standing in the middle of a group of people passing around cans of spray paint and laminated maps of my property. At one point, she pointed at the corner of my lot and said, "The downspout's vulnerable. Start there." It's non-conforming. She wasn't just tolerating the stunt, she orchestrated it. The second folder was even better. A phone recording of what appeared to be an HOA board meeting, audio only with a PowerPoint presentation projected in the background. Karen's voice dominated. "If this goes to court, we pivot to community preservation language. Call it aesthetic mitigation. Say we tried to integrate him. If we drown him in procedure, he'll move just to get peace." Someone in the room actually laughed. "We'll make him a cautionary tale." My blood went cold. I called Megan, my lawyer, and within 15 minutes, we were on Zoom. I shared my screen, showed her the footage, let her listen to the board meeting, watched her expression turn from skeptical to surgical. "Well," she said, leaning back, "this just went from annoying to actionable." By that afternoon, Megan had drafted a comprehensive civil lawsuit. We were suing Karen Milton personally and the HOA as a corporate entity for criminal trespass, harassment and stalking, property damage, filing false documents with county authorities, attempted fraudulent annexation, unauthorized use of personal information, conspiracy to defraud, We attached the video files as exhibits, along with the fake lease agreement, the altered petition, the art demonstration, PDF metadata, my police reports, statements from Gerald Hines, and other neighbors confirming their signatures had been forged. And to top it off, Megan filed a parallel complaint with the North Carolina Department of Insurance and Real Estate Commission, requesting a formal investigation into HOA fund misuse, unauthorized property claims, and Karen's abuse of her position. Damages sought $550,000. We weren't just suing over property lines anymore. We were suing over Karen's entire strategy of authoritarian insanity, disguised as neighborhood management. That same evening, as if summoned by some HOA bat signal, a reporter showed up. Local paper. Young, sharp, smelled like ambition and cheap ink. She introduced herself, said she'd gotten wind of the dispute from a sheriff's office contact, and wanted a quote. I didn't give her a soundbite. I gave her the full story. All of it. The fake lease, the midnight harassment, the spray paint, the doctored petition, the phony vote, the boardroom tapes. I told her I had the footage and I was ready to go to court. She listened like she'd stumbled onto Watergate with golf carts. 2 days later, the article dropped. Can a private HOA annex a non-member? The Battle for Parcel 112B, front page of the county section, accompanied by a still image from the spray paint video, with Karen's face frozen mid-rant. I didn't hear from her for 3 days after that. Then came the email, a long, whining, gaslight-drenched essay from Karen Milton, HOA president, CCing the HOA board and a few select residents. She claimed I had initiated hostilities, that I was aggressively resisting community harmony, and that I had placed residents in fear by weaponizing surveillance and outing internal documents. I let Megan handle it. Her reply was 2 sentences long. All communication is now directed through legal counsel. Any further contact with my client constitutes harassment. Karen went silent, but the board didn't. I started getting screenshots from residents, people inside the HOA who'd had enough of internal threads, messages, group chats where Karen had demanded access to HOA funds for legal retaliation, authorized a rebranding project to spin the media narrative, instructed residents to log any suspicious behavior from me, including when I mowed my lawn. This wasn't management. This was obsession, and she wasn't just losing control of me. She was losing control of her own people. I was outside clearing brush near the back fence when a county-issue SUV pulled up and a man in a blue windbreaker stepped out. Middle-aged, clipboard in hand, badge lanyard flapping in the breeze. Thomas Rivers, that's me. He nodded, handed me an official envelope and said, "You've been added to a scheduled evidentiary hearing for Parcel 112B. You'll need to appear next Friday, 10 a.m. Courthouse C." I opened the envelope right there. Inside, a petition for reassessment of property classification filed by Karen Milton and the HOA board. They were trying to legally reclassify my lot as common use buffer land to justify their previous actions retroactively. The move was insane, bold, desperate. I called Megan. They're trying to rewrite zoning history, I said. Her tone went from calm to lethal in half a second. If they push this through, it'll give them standing to demand access, maintenance rights, even development priority. It's a backdoor land grab. We're not just going to fight it. We're going to blow it out of the water. The next few days were a blur of calls, printer jams, scanned maps, scanned deeds, notarized affidavits. We dug deep. Megan contacted a land surveyor who had been working in the county for over 30 years. He remembered the parcel and had original hand-drawn plats from before the HOA was even incorporated. Those old records showed clearly. My lot was part of a legacy private parcel that predated the HOA by nearly 4 decades. Not only that, but the HOA's perimeter stopped over 60 feet away from my southern boundary. Their whole case relied on a single updated map Karen had pushed through the zoning commission 2 years ago, an update that had never been formally ratified by the county assessor. We had the original surveyor come in person. Court day came, and I showed up in a button-down and boots. No suit, no tie, just me. Karen arrived with 2 HOA board members and some overpriced lawyer who looked like he charged extra for words like adjournment and amicable. The judge, an older guy with a gut that screamed bourbon and skepticism, read through the preliminary brief, then looked up at Karen's side. Ms. Milton, you're requesting a full zoning reassignment of a parcel that's clearly outside your corporate HOA boundary? Karen gave a tight smile. We're seeking consistency, Your Honor. This resident disrupts planned community cohesion. The parcel has no historic designation and… The judge cut her off with a grunt. Mr. Rivers, do you have documentation to support your claim? Megan stepped forward, cool, unshaken. She laid it all out, the plats, the county logs, the real estate records going back to the 70s. Then she dropped the bomb, the audio of Karen from the HOA meeting admitting they planned to drown him in procedure. The judge blinked. Is this the president of the HOA? Yes, Your Honor, Megan said. And this hearing is the drowning attempt. Silence. Then he leaned back and said, I'm inclined to rule now, unless either party feels lucky. Karen's lawyer mumbled something about continuance. Denied. Then came the ruling. The judge upheld my ownership, declared the HOA's petition invalid and abusive, and issued a cease and desist order to the HOA regarding any further contact or attempts to annex my land. But that wasn't all. He referred the HOA to the County Fraud Division for investigation. Karen's face, in that moment, looked like someone had just told her the IRS was moving into her guest room. We walked out to sunshine and a row of stunned neighbors who had come to watch, some of them in HOA shirts. A few clapped. One elderly man even shook my hand and said, God bless you, son. About time someone stood up to these vultures. But Karen wasn't done. Later that evening, she filed a formal ethics complaint against Megan, claiming excessive aggression and unprofessional demeanor. It was laughable and quickly dismissed, but it showed one thing. Karen was spiraling. And cornered animals do stupid things. I thought maybe, just maybe, after the judge's ruling and the fraud referral, Karen would crawl back under whatever quartz countertop she'd slithered out from. But no, she doubled down. 2 days later, while I was loading gravel near the back lot, a pickup truck pulled up. Unmarked. 2 guys in reflective vests stepped out. Young, nervous, clearly not county. One had a clipboard with an HOA logo sticker haphazardly slapped on the back. Excuse us, sir, the lead one said, squinting into the sun. We're here to conduct a compliance sweep. Karen Milton sent us. I set the shovel down. On whose authority? The HOA. There've been complaints. I laughed out loud. This is private property. I'm not under HOA jurisdiction, and if you take one step past that fence line, you're trespassing. They hesitated. Then one said, Ma'am said you might be uncooperative. She instructed us to photograph non-compliant features. I grabbed my phone, hit record. Here's my reply. You have 10 seconds to get off my land before I call the sheriff. And if you even think about pointing that camera at my house, I'll sue for harassment so hard your kids will inherit the paperwork. They left, in reverse, one muttering, We didn't sign up for this. Later that night, I got a text from a neighbor who barely knew Sandra lived 2 cul-de-sacs down, said she worked in HOA admin part-time. She had screenshots. Karen had created a secret Telegram group with a few board members and select residents. She was actively plotting a harassment campaign, using what she called civic pressure tools, reporting me for fabricated zoning violations, sending complaint letters to the county about illegal runoff, organizing a wellness check to try and get authorities to my door, requesting that the HOA's private patrol conduct late-night visibility rides near my house to deter undesirable conduct. It was borderline stalking. Megan filed a temporary restraining order request the next morning against Karen personally, and just when I thought we'd hit peak madness, it happened. I came home from town and noticed a new sign bolted to my mailbox post. Cheap aluminum painted in HOA green and white. Private road, HOA member access only. I ripped it off, dumped it into the trash, and called the sheriff. Deputy Thompson showed up in under 20 minutes, took one look at the sign, took a photo, then asked if I'd noticed the driveway markings. What markings? I asked. He pointed. At the edge of my gravel entrance, someone had spray painted a faint white line with the letters HOABDRY, boundary. It looked like they tried to redraw the neighborhood border overnight. They're escalating, he said grimly. You got cameras? 3 now. Adding 2 more tomorrow. He nodded. Good. Because this isn't a civil disagreement anymore. It's targeted harassment. I could barely sleep that night. I knew Karen was running out of moves, but that made her more dangerous, not less. I wasn't just dealing with power-hungry idiocy. I was dealing with someone who couldn't admit she lost. Then came the real kicker, a certified letter. From a Karen Milton Community Integration Officer. I opened it slowly. Inside was a formal notice of expulsion stating that my continued uncooperative conduct, refusal to submit to oversight, and repeated acts of aggression had resulted in a unilateral severance of residential eligibility. Translation: she was trying to evict me from my own land. Megan almost choked laughing when I showed her. She invented a title. You don't even live under her jurisdiction. I know, I said, but it doesn't matter to her. In her head, she runs the mountain. We filed an amended lawsuit that same day, now including civil conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, false representation of government authority, retaliatory action after court ruling. The judge granted the restraining order the following week. Karen was legally barred from contacting me, entering my property, or using any HOA resource to reference my name. But I wasn't satisfied because we'd just uncovered something that would change everything. One of the neighbors had dug up old HOA financial records and passed them to Megan anonymously. Inside, a series of payments, small, spread out, made to a consulting firm owned by Karen's cousin. The firm had submitted land reassessment strategy reports. Months before the HOA ever voted to claim my parcel. That meant Karen was planning this long before any community concern emerged. She wasn't enforcing policy. She was running a long con. The trial was scheduled for the end of the month. Civil court, but the air felt heavier than some criminal hearings I'd been to years ago. Megan said it best as we sat in that echoey courtroom. This isn't just about property. This is about punishing abuse of power. Karen walked in like she still ran the place. White blazer, big sunglasses, lips pinched so tight it looked like she was biting back a scream. Behind her, two of the HOA board members and a real attorney this time. Not the slick guy from before, but a worn-out civil defense lawyer who looked like he already knew they'd lose. Megan opened like a sledgehammer. She didn't waste time on emotion. She started with maps, the deed chain, the surveyor's affidavit, and the court ruling that had already confirmed my land was not, and never had been, HOA property. Then she walked the court through a timeline of HOA actions after that ruling. The harassment, the falsified signs, the compliance patrols, the fabricated letters. Then she dropped the bomb. The payments to Karen's cousin's consulting firm, and the fact that said cousin had never filed a business license in the state. It wasn't just unethical, it was fraud. We had emails, we had invoices. We had internal HOA meeting notes leaked by a fed-up treasurer, where Karen openly said, "The parcel's too valuable to let him keep it. I'll handle it my way." Karen's lawyer objected, begged to suppress the leak. Denied. The judge, same one from the zoning case, looked exhausted, but his voice was steady when he finally leaned forward. "I have rarely seen a clearer case of retaliatory abuse of process," he said. This homeowner was harassed, defamed, surveilled, and targeted with legal actions rooted in deliberate misrepresentation. He ruled in our favor on every count. Karen was ordered to pay $250,000 in compensatory damages, $80,000 in legal fees, plus a personal fine of $30,000 for malicious abuse of administrative procedure. But the judge didn't stop there. He referred Karen Milton and two board members for criminal investigation for filing false claims, attempted zoning fraud, misuse of HOA funds, harassment through civil process. Karen's mouth dropped open when she realized this wasn't just about money anymore. This was jail time. And sure enough, 3 weeks later, the sheriff's office issued a public notice. Karen had been indicted on 4 felony counts. She was arrested at her own HOA board meeting, handcuffed in front of everyone. I stood on my porch that night with a cup of coffee and watched 2 news vans drive past. One even stopped for a moment, then moved on, probably looking for a good angle of the HOA clubhouse. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I was tired, but satisfied. The new HOA board quietly emailed every resident a notice of board restructuring, and in small print included an apology for previous leadership conduct not reflective of the community's values, Megan told me. If they so much as mention your name again, I'll make sure they never walk into another courtroom without thinking of you. We laughed. A week later, I took down the extra cameras. The driveway stayed quiet. No signs, no fake patrols, no Karen, just me, the mountain, and the land that was always mine. no matter what some wannabe HOA queen told herself.